Today is April 18th, 2013, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Reven Zalesnik at his home at 39 Pepper Ridge Place in Stamford, Connecticut. My name is Lester Charlack, and the videographer is Marcy Schoenfeld, both members of the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County. Good afternoon, Reven. Happy to be meeting with you today to do the personal history for the Jewish Historical Society. Tell me, what is your full name?
Reven Zalesnik.
And where were you born? In what year?
I was born in New York City in 1934 in what is now Lincoln Center.
And where was your mother from?
My mother was from the United States. She was New Yorker, born here. Her parents were emigres.
From what country?
From Poland.
Mm-hmm. And how about your dad?
Dad was an immigrant from Poland. He came to this country in the early 20s, mid-20s. He had, his story is an interesting tale of itself. I've got about 18 hours of audio tapes interviewing him, and he passed away 20 years ago, soon after my son was married, 2 months after.
How old was he when he came to the United States?
He was, let's see, 16 and 10, he was about 26 or 27.
And what was his occupation when he came here?
Really didn't have one, because he had spent almost 10 years on the road after leaving Poland, and while in Argentina he was a tailor. So I guess that was his occupation at the time, although in the old country his father and all of his relatives were butchers.
And he came to the United States from Argentina?
Not quite. He spent 9 years in Argentina and then 1 year in Cuba, in Havana, because he couldn't get directly into the United States. He got here illegally and then had to leave the country. I was about 7 years old at the time. He, my mother, my aunt, who was working for the Immigration Service at the time, and she was married to my mother's brother. They left me with a live-in maid, and they went up to Canada, spent a few days, and then re-entered the country legally.
Later on in life, when he was in the United States, what was the occupation there that
He was a
supported
butcher.
the
He
family?
became a butcher because by the time he arrived in the United States, his whole family had emigrated during these 10 years of his leaving Poland. So they had established themselves, and he worked for them.
And getting back to your childhood, where were you born?
Well, you got that. That was in New York, Manhattan.
Yeah, and where did you go to school?
Grade school, by the time I was 2, my parents had moved up from Manhattan into the Bronx, lived across the street from Evander Childs, from DeWitt Clinton High School. And I went to kindergarten and first grade in the Bronx, near where the reservoir is. Oh gosh, that's the neighborhood of Montefiore Hospital. And then my parents eventually moved to the East Bronx, Northeast Bronx. And I finished grade school in the Bronx, and then junior high school in the Bronx, and started high school in the Bronx before they moved to Westchester, and I finished up and graduated high school in Mount Vernon.
And in the school systems you went through, were there a lot of other Jewish students? Did you find?
Yes, the schooling was interesting. You know, when you look at that, I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but it was at a time when the New York City school system were very stratified, and for middle school, for example, there must have been 9 classes of the same grade. And the Jewish students, for the most part, were all bunched up in the top 2 or 3 grades, which were academically oriented. It was, may you live in interesting times.
So you found virtually no anti-Semitism because.
Oh, no. Oh, I was beaten up 2 or 3 times a week regularly in the Bronx. Oh, my mother probably went to the Catholic Church and the parish priests more often than most of the churchgoers went, you know, attempting to get some redress for what was going on. But, oh no, anti-Semitism was absolutely rampant. Absolutely rampant.
And did you find that throughout the entire school system, is it?
Grade school, I remember as being significantly anti-Semitic. Middle school, definitely. By the time I moved to Mount Vernon, and I finished my last year and a half of high school in Mount Vernon, by that time in Mount Vernon there wasn't, didn't have that kind of a problem.
What year did you graduate high school?
High school in 1951, January of 51.
So you must have skipped a couple grades through school.
I skipped, what, 3 grades at least.
And where did you go on for further education?
February 51 started NYU and graduated there in 54. Then service, after I got out of service, went back to NYU for graduate work, this time in physical therapy, and got my master's degree there. Then in 1975-76, another graduate degree, this in public health at University of Michigan.
Was this all under the GI Bill that you were able to go?
The GI Bill took care of took care of Michigan.
Mhm.
Yale took care of some of the rest at Michigan. Michigan really didn't cost me anything. It was zero
Mhm.
between the subsidies from the medical center and the GI Bill.
And the time there's an interruption there, you said you were in the Army?
Yeah, I'd say we were in the Army.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was March of '55 through March of '57.
And what was your rank when you were in the Army?
Getting out, it was first lieutenant.
And what were your responsibilities there?
Interesting. I was first stationed down in Georgia, Fort Benning. And in Fort Benning, it was a basic infantry officers course. And I had applied for the Army Air Force. And so while all this was pending, I was on temporary duty in Fort Benning. Altogether spent 6 months down there, really doing nothing other than checking in the morning, going about whatever I wanted to do during the day, checked in at lunch, checked out in the afternoon, and then checked out finally in the evening. And except for occasionally pulling crazy duties like taking inventory of a commissary or doing odd jobs, you know. It was a lark. When I finally, this was, you know, all during the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, when the Air Force, Army Air Corps didn't come through, I was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, assigned to the 2nd Infantry Division, 38th Infantry Regiment. I was a platoon leader. And because the Korean War was winding down, they now took the regiment, the whole 2nd Division, which had just come back from Korea. Now they took the regiment and split them up, and they sent 1 battalion up to Alaska. Another battalion stayed in Fort Lewis, and the 3rd Battalion, which I was in, was shipped down to California, where we trained National Guards and Reserves for 4 months while they spent their 2 weeks of active duty, you know, summer training. Then went back to Fort Lewis and was mustered out of there.
So we now, you finished your graduate school. Where were you, what was your first job?
First job was at Bronx Municipal Hospital, off Pelham Parkway, Eastchester Road. The hospital had just opened up about 6 months before I finished graduate school. You got to realize, it got out in March of '57, and then I wasn't a physical therapist at that time. So I had to make up some courses in biology and the natural sciences, and my course grades were so good, basically I aced them. NYU offered me a job as a teaching instructor downtown. So here I was teaching anatomy, comparative anatomy, a course that I had never taken. At the same time, that gave me entree to graduate school and free tuition for the most part. So now by September of that year, I now finished what was then called a certificate program. Certificate program was the ability to become licensed in the state of New York. I then took a job at Bronx Municipal Hospital, and I was there for 7 years.
And what was your title? What was your position?
I was a staff physical therapist and then a supervising physical therapist. And I was also doing teaching for Ithaca College and Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Taught anatomy, human anatomy, dissection anatomy, and was also doing neurophysiology research at the same time. So, I mean, we were into all sorts of things. The department head was looking to retain good staff, and so little crumbs, professional crumbs were thrown your way to boost your salary, even though it meant evening hours, even though it meant taking time away from what the city of New York was paying me, which was a pittance at the time. The salary in New York for a physical therapist was about $65 a week. It was $3,700 a year with a master's degree. I was going to school at night for that first year, and after that first year, I now had my master's in physical therapy in addition to the certificate. So, I mean, there were all sorts of little things that
Yeah.
went.
So when you changed positions, how much did the...
Oh, it gave you another $1,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was next to nothing. But, you know, by that time, you know, my son had been born, my daughter was born certainly before I left there. And, you know, you scraped through and you needed every penny you could get, directly or indirectly. So.
And what was the next step up in your career?
Next, from there I went up to New Haven as chief physical therapist. I was there for 3 years. It was good. I found it oppressive. Interesting.
And when you left New Haven?
Oh, I skipped around a lot. We skipped around a lot. From New Haven, which also meant a faculty appointment at Yale School of Medicine, and also a faculty appointment, clinical faculty at Quinnipiac College. From New Haven, went to Columbia, down in New York, and took a job as assistant administrator at Harlem Hospital, and saw through the construction of a 26-story building. And also the recruitment of a new staff, because the city of New York had entered into arrangements with the city hospitals and a nearby teaching university. So Bronx Municipal became a subset of Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and Montefiore Hospital. Kings County Hospital became a subset of Maimonides Hospital and Downstate Medical Center. Harlem Hospital, where I was farmed to, became a subset of Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons. And so I now had a faculty appointment at Columbia P&S.
And where were you living at that time?
By then, we were here. We had moved here in the mid-60s, 64. And those were the days when a commute, well, we lived, about 200 yards from where we're sitting right now. That was the first house in Stamford. And a commute from there down to the Bronx at the time was about 25 minutes door to door. Now it's 25 minutes getting to the thruway.
What year was that?
That was 64.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you remember how much you paid for this house then?
For that house?
Yeah.
Yeah, that house was 27 thou.
Mm-hmm.
That house was 27 thou. Couldn't have done it without my father-in-law, who gave us a no-interest loan, which we paid back.
And when did you go out to California?
California was 1969, October of 69. What had happened in April of 69, I was at Harlem Hospital, Columbia at that time, and I had gone, I believe it was a physical therapy convention in Las Vegas. It may have been Los Angeles, I'm not sure. But I went out with the specific goal of looking for and recruiting staff for Harlem Hospital. And in the process, I was recruited by a healthcare agency, a company with an option, into a partnership. It really sounded good. So, by October of 69, school had started here already. There was no place really to live out there. So I went out alone. Myra and the kids remained here. And I said, okay, let me go out, we'll try it. I can get a small apartment, a one-bedroom, apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And if things work out, fine. You come out at the end of the school year, we'll sell the house here and make the trip out. Well, as it happened, this was October 69. November, December, January of 1969, January 1st, all of a sudden, the government, the feds, said, we can't afford these Medicare reimbursements anymore. And so they unilaterally cut off the flow of money to all of the health care agencies and in the 4-county Los Angeles metro area. 33 out of 34 home health agencies went belly up overnight because they had no source of income, and their income for the prior 6 months, which had been in the mill, were unilaterally terminated. So now everybody is walking the streets. And Myra's here, she was working, teaching. So at least we had a semblance of an income. I had family out in the area, and now the question was, what do? Do I turn tail immediately and fly back? Or, gee, maybe try to make a go of it? I said, you know, as long as I'm here, let's try. With this family, who had become very, very friendly with, I said, okay, let me try to open up some offices by myself. And I'll open up 3 offices. It sounds crazy. I mean, don't have any money, and here you're opening up offices. What I did, I opened up one office in Pomona, California, one office in Hacienda Heights, California, which is just over the Puente Hills from Whittier, just north of Whittier, and one office in Downey, California. So they were in 3 disparate communities. I said, whichever one is going to work, that I'll keep. The lowest of them all, I will close after a couple of weeks or a couple of months, what have you. I knew by then I had contacts with suppliers of equipment, and one of my cousin's uncles was in the furniture business. He said, okay, tell you what, really all you need is a couple of chairs and a couple of lamps and what have you for a waiting room. The one you're sitting on in that one, those are 2 from that office. They cost me $10 at the time. Okay. Which lamp? No, I don't have any of them here. Couple that I'll throw in, you know. And now I had some treatment rooms in the back. I used small portable equipment. And what I would do, I'd have get to the office before a patient came in, and I would set up the small portable equipment in this one treatment room. And in another treatment room, I would put a small manual timer so that it would ding, ding, ding. Mm-hmm. And I had an answering service, and I just tell them, you know, you will call about once every 20 minutes or so, and then just so that the phone rings. So now I'd have a patient come in, treat them. In the meantime, the ringer would go, and I said, just wait a second, I've got to see Mr. Simonson in the other room. There's nobody in there, but it sounds like I'm busy. Okay, and I'd come back in a couple of minutes, and meantime the phone is ringing, and then, you know, I'd pick up and I'd say, okay, I can see you on such and such a day. There's a blank call, you know, obviously. So you have to put on a front. In the meantime, the agency that I had been working for originally from October they hadn't repoed their car yet, and so I had this Chevy Silverado, which is an open bed back behind a cab, and I could just load all of the stuff. After the patient left, I would go and load all the stuff and drive over to the whatever other office I needed. A second office was in what do you say, Downey, and that was in a building owned by a group of physicians. One of those physicians was a member of Havara that I had joined out there, who was a very close friend of one of my cousins who was out there, who was also a physician. And he said, "You come in, won't charge you anything. I've got the whole upstairs. You can set it up as your office and what have you. We have secretarial coverage, you know, we'll make appointments and you can get your referrals from this group of 15 docs or so." And that was working out fairly well. The third office, out in Pomona, that was owned by a physician who was also a psychiatrist, as was my cousin, the doc. And he was trained at Loma Linda University, which is Seventh-day Adventist hospital, and they preferred not to use medication. It was just a philosophical thing. As he said, I'm not going to charge you anything, but here, just take care of my patients who need, instead of drugs for relaxation and anxiety and what have you, physical therapy for it. So that was that. And that's how the offices went for a little while until all of a sudden February came. And there was a major earthquake out north in the San Fernando Valley. And that was about 7 o'clock in the morning, I guess. Myra and the kids by then had not gone to school, and we'd rented a house with an option to buy. The earthquake was 60 miles away. And it was so severe that my neighbor across the street, who had an in-ground pool, the water had sloshed out. And there was 3 feet of water left in an 8-foot deep in-ground pool. That was pretty darn frightening. About the same time, Ronald Reagan was governor, and the Secretary of Education, California education system at the time, I'm not sure of it now, but at the time it was very, very centralized. And Max Rafferty was the Chancellor or Commissioner of Education. I don't remember the exact title. And they were so cash-strapped that they had started to limit the class offerings in the schools. At that time, they had seniors in the high school taking 5 subjects. That was it. No more. And they had promised that the following year, this was end of the winter, beginning of spring, they had promised that by this next year, it was going to be down to 4 subjects, and this was really something that was going to compromise my son's education. He was in middle school at the time, was about to go into high school, and that was going to compromise his whole future. Again, same time, all of a sudden, I get a phone call from Yale. Would you like to come back? We will pay for your moving. And I went back with Myra and the kids to visit, because this was the same week that her brother was going to have his wedding. So we could combine the thing. Everything sounded really good up at Yale. By the time I got back to California, I didn't give them a commitment yet. By the time I got back to California, I went to one of my offices, the one in Pomona. I'm driving around and I can't find the office. There's no building there. The building had disappeared. It had been during the week or 10 days that we were gone. There had been a fire. And one of the patients, I told you this guy was a psychiatrist, Loma Linda University. One of the patients from the psychiatric hospital next door had gotten out and had torched the building. Now it was really a danger, and so the city demolished the building, razed the building to the ground, and so I couldn't find the place. Now, my equipment just happened to be in that particular office. It was now all gone. And all of my accounts receivable from these few months, they're gone. I've got nothing. So between the Yale offer, the fire, and now the earthquake, and called up New Haven, I said, we'll take it. So we came back to Stanford, and one of the caveats that we find a house close to where we lived before, so that the kids wouldn't have two major upheavals within a year. And it was fortunate that we found this house, just a couple of 100 yards away.
What year is this?
This was 71, the beginning of 71. Or I should say, we left there in May of 71 because that was the end of the school year. I mean, the school year was horrible out there. My daughter was in grade school. She would have had a problem with her.
Well, getting back to your life.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was rambling.
Getting back to your life in Stanford, how involved were you with the Jewish community or other involvements?
In the very beginning, in the mid-60s, my godmother, who was my mother's sister-in-law, her brother's wife, she had a brother who lived here in Stanford, who was director of the Jewish Community Center, Lenny Kleinman, and he softened the way, back into the Jewish community. Al and Rosie Ziskin. We were in, my son was involved with Ross Gelb's Scouts.
Yeah.
I had tried earlier to set up, before we left to California, I had tried to set up a troop of handicapped kids here in Stamford, and that was a disaster. That was with the Junior Chamber of Commerce. But we were heavily involved. We were heavily involved with Aguda Shalom before we went to California, and then we came back, and we had been so immersed in Reconstructionist Judaism. We wanted my daughter bat mitzvah in Aguda Shalom, and Joe Ehrenkrantz wouldn't have any of it, and we finally prevailed on him. We had a bat mitzvah. I think it was the first bat mitzvah in Aguda Shalom in 1972. It had to be 71.
No.
I'm sorry. Anyway,
Friday.
What?
The first Friday.
I know it was a Friday, but I'm just looking for the year. It had to be 72 because we'd gotten back to Stanford in June of 71 after spending almost 6 weeks on the road camping across country. But the caveat that Joe insisted on was that there were certain prayers that she wouldn't allow a woman, a girl, to recite. And so I did those. He didn't participate in the service at all. And it had to be a Friday night, wouldn't allow it on Saturday. Interesting. We had a very disheartening experience that fall for the high holidays when I had the flu and Myra went down to the synagogue and they wouldn't let her in because she didn't have a ticket with her. And before we went to California, I'd been president of the Couples Club, which at that time had 150 couples, at least. So we were active, and it was Gotchberg,
Larry Goshberg.
and the powers that be, he was president at the time, and the powers that be had said, okay, we've got to have a policeman at the door. And they wouldn't allow her. She came home not able to participate in high holiday services. She was crying. And I waited till holiday was over, and I called up Joe Ehrenkrantz, and I just reamed him up one wall across the ceiling and down the other. I said, I'm sorry, I don't do this to anybody. I treat the synagogue as my home, and my door is open, and that synagogue door should be open. Anyway, that led to a major breakup, and other than particular,
You've been non-affiliated since.
not really. We were affiliated, but we had joined a Havurah out in California, And we were dues-paying members of that Havurah until it disbanded last year, 1 year ago. It was the first Havurah in the United States. We were active with that thing. We were dues-paying. We were avid, and still I'm an avid reconstructionist. But I don't believe I have to have an edifice complex. I just,
You know, getting back to your working career,
oh,
when did you retire from your last
real
paying
job.
job?
Real job. I retired from Yale in '86. I worked part-time for my sister in her private practice office in Dobbs Ferry for about 3 years, a couple of half days a week.
What was your sister's practice? What was-
Physical therapy,
Mhm.
yeah.
And how many other siblings do you have?
Other than that one sister who's 3 years younger than me, I have another sister who is 10 years younger than me.
Okay, so you've now retired, and what do you do to keep busy?
Oh, go to doctors? Tell me, what else? Have you interviewed anyone else who has anything else other than that for a major activity? I've had hobbies with, all of this time. I guess, it started as a teenager woodworking with my dad. He had a shop in the basement of our house. While in service, I was active with leather work, pocketbooks and attaché briefcases.
I remember you making a wallet and giving it to me years ago.
Yeah. Then once I started work at Bronx Municipal Jacoby in the East Bronx, right out the side door of the medical center was a exotic wood supplier by the name of Constantine. They're no longer there. They, some decades ago, moved to Florida. But the wood pictures you see on the wall, the marquetry pictures, I used to go over there at lunchtime, and just the smell of the woods, the exotic wood. I mean, you wouldn't find anything comparable in a lumberyard today. These were all solid planks of woods or veneers or what have you, all sorts of specialty items. And at that time, we founded Marquetry Society of America to promote this stuff. And those pictures on the wall hung in the Metropolitan Museum of Art for an exhibition that our members put on.
Do you remember what year that was?
That was 1975.
Mhm.
That was 1975. I think on the back of one of those there's still the label from but those are stories unto themselves. When we came back, meanwhile, I told you that we were camping cross country.
You had a travel trailer.
We had a travel trailer. And just a couple of weeks before, a month before, we had picked up a pup at the shelter in California. And this little thing was quite big in the 6 weeks, 5.5 weeks that it took us to travel cross country. In the meantime, the kids were picking up rocks along the way. And by the time we got to Connecticut here, we had boxes of rocks in that travel trailer. What am I gonna do with the rocks? So I went out and bought a tumbler. And now instead of boxes of rocks, I had boxes of tumbled rocks. By the time I finished tumbling, the kids had lost interest in the rocks, but I hadn't. I said, as long as I'm gonna do that, it's ridiculous to spend time tumbling rocks. They're worth nothing. They're pretty, but they're worth nothing. So I bought a unit to make cabochons. Cabochons are the domed kind of stones that you see with turquoise or opals or what have you. They're not transparent gems as you would find diamonds and rubies and, sapphires. So now I had these cabochons. I took some lessons, joined a mineral club here in Stanford, and I said, this is ridiculous. As long as I'm spending time and I'm enjoying it, I might as well learn to cut gemstones and facet. So I now facet gemstones, and been doing that. In the process, within a month, I was faceting better than the gentleman who taught me. And I've been faceting ever since. It got to be so good that I became the resident faceting instructor for the Eastern Federation of Mineralogical Societies. And Mara and I were going down to North Carolina, where I would teach a gem cutting course. Recent years, it has been once a year. In the earlier years or so, it was twice a year, and I did that for 26 years until last year, the first year that I missed, and I reneged on going down this year. So it will be 2 years that I will have absented myself.
Well, you have a beautiful collection of specimens here. Can we get up and go over there and you can explain the highlights of the collection?
Well, sure. Well, most of these have a story to them. Some of these are self-collected. Some of them are purchased. Some of them are traded. But all of the cut gemstones in here are stones that I've cut. Some of the more interesting ones, let's start over here. That is amber. It's something you don't see that's faceted. It was cut for a friend who wanted a stone for her mother, and she wanted a chunky big stone, but it had to go into a pendant, a brooch. So now you take a big stone like that, you put it in a brooch, and it's going to fall over because the cloth of the blouse or jacket can't hold the weight of it, so it has to be unbelievably light. So now you try it. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread, And that's what this is. It took me a year and a half to get that right, because I killed multiple stones in the process. But so much for that. The another one is this particular stone. And the reason that this particular stone is, this is not the cut stone, this is the specimen. This is beryl. This was from Connecticut, and it's from the Upper Merial Quarry, way up Route 8. Now, this is probably the finest specimen to come out of Connecticut. Museums have wanted this particular specimen from me. I don't think I want to part with it, but Harvard has asked for it. Yale has asked for it. American Museum of Natural History has asked for it. So be it. Stays with Zalesnik has asked for it. The upper one is a marquetry picture of a New England village. You can see that it's signed in the lower right corner. I routed that out. The bottom one is a rendition of the Grand Tetons. That was taken from a photo of on a calendar. That one was taken from a photograph of a Swiss village.
How many different types of wood do you use?
In that one, there probably were at least 50 different kinds of wood.
Okay.
And the sailboat picture was the first one I ever did, and that was, believe it or not, from a kit. The woods was supplied, the background was supplied, but then you had to cut everything out yourself.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Let's finish up and tell us a little bit about your other Jewish relationships to the community and to your family.
I grew up really in a non-religious home, although the family affiliation was with an Orthodox synagogue. That was the only Jewish house of worship in the neighborhood. But I was sent to both a Volksschule, a Yiddish school, which I detested, and a Hebrew school, subsequently, which wasn't that much better. Really, this was all in prep for my bar mitzvah, which was in an Orthodox synagogue. Once bar mitzvah was passed, there really was little or no participation. Judaism didn't hold much for me, other than I guess some basic values which I felt were very, very important at the time. I mean, you dated only Jewish girls. You planned to marry only a Jewish girl. Anything outside the religion was taboo. That really was the case until the Army, when I remember pulling maneuvers when I was stationed in Washington, pulling maneuvers out in the field one winter out in Yakima, and we arrived by convoy, and overnight 4 feet of snow had fallen, and now maneuvers had to be canceled. So what do? You learn to build igloos, and it just so happened there was also a Friday. Okay, So I conducted a service with a little Army Jewish manual that was available at the time, and we had about a dozen GIs, and that was my contact with Judaism. After quite a few years, and when we lived out in California during this year and a half hiatus, became very involved with the Reconstructionist movement. It was enlightening, it was enjoyable, it was stimulating. It was stimulating to the point of now I started to write my own Haggadah. And from 1971, I used the Maxwell House Haggadah. By 1972, I had purchased the Reconstructionist Haggadah. I got a couple of dozen of those, and those lasted us for about 4 years or so. And then I said, I didn't even like those. So up at Yale, had an IBM Selectric, and would buy the little type balls that you can replace on the IBM Selectric, and got a couple of type balls with different fonts. And in the evening, that first year, it had to be 75, 76, typed out my own Haggadah, and did that for a number of years, and edited and changed it. I've got copies of all of these old Haggadot in the other room. And 1984, when Apple came out with its Macintosh computer at the Super Bowl in '84, I purchased through the Yale Consortium one of the very first home Macs. And I've been redoing a Haggadah every year since then. New edition. Involvement with Judaism has been at my own level, my own personal commitment, Myra, my wife's personal commitment. We've had high holiday services out on the patio. It's marvelous. I mean, to be under the trees out, and do this sort of thing has been a labor of love. It's been a labor of love.
Well, Reuven, we want to thank you very much for giving us your life history, and we will have a DVD that you can share with your children and the rest of your family.
I thank you.
Thank you.